Hello, Patriots, and welcome again to Patriot Point. We've got a great video for you this week. We're going to go over two big things. First of all, it's Women's History Month, so I'm going to give you a little bit of Kentucky Women's History Month. I think you'll find it fascinating, and I bet it's something you never heard about in history class. And second, we're going to go over the legislative roundup. The General Assembly is now done for the year, and so we're going to take a look back and see which laws actually got passed here in Kentucky this year, which things failed to get passed into law, and one bill that still needs your help to become law even though the legislative year is over. But first, let's talk about Women's History Month and a remarkable woman here in Kentucky. It was back in the early 1800s. It was the year 1809. There was a lady by the name of Jane Todd Crawford. She had a major problem. She thought she was pregnant but was unable to deliver. Well, the doctor examined her and says, "You're not pregnant. You have a 22.5-pound ovarian tumor, and it's lethal. It's going to kill you." Well, she contacted a Kentucky doctor by the name of Dr. Ephraim McDowell, who practiced medicine in Danville, Kentucky. And he says, "Mrs. Crawford, I think I can help you. There's a surgery that I've come up with. Everybody says it's impossible, but I think it just might save your life if you're willing to try." So Mrs. Crawford got on her horse and rode 60 miles on horseback to get to this Kentucky doctor in Danville, Kentucky. And he says, "All right, I'm going to operate you. I'm going to cut this out." Now, in the year 1809, when this happened, they didn't have anesthesiologists like we have today, so most doctors just got their patients liquored up. However, Mrs. Crawford was a Christian. She says, "I'm not going to drink. I don't believe in that." And so he operated on her, removing more than a 22-pound tumor with no anesthetic at all. It is said that Mrs. Crawford sang hymns and quoted the Psalms to distract her mind from what was happening to her. She did survive the surgery and outlived the doctor by more than 12 years. She lived 32 years after this surgery was over. And so Dr. McDowell became known as the father of ovarian cancer. And in fact, today in Danville, Kentucky, we have McDowell Hospital that is there in honor of Dr. McDowell. And let me tell you what he said about this surgery. See, Dr. McDowell gave God the glory. Notice what he said about this. Quote, "I can only say that the blessings of God has rested on my efforts." And he is specifically talking about the surgery with Mrs. Crawford. Go look it up on Wikipedia. You can learn more about it. It's really fascinating. And today in the Kentucky Capitol, they have this statue here of Dr. McDowell. To the bottom right of the doctor in a bowl is actually the size of the tumor that he took out of Mrs. Crawford. And here's a little piece of extra history for you. If you look at the bottom of that statue in the Kentucky Capitol, if you look closely at the letter A and I in the name Ephraim, you'll see somebody put the letters backwards and they had to fill it in and switch the letters back around. So a little piece of history about Kentucky and the Kentucky Capitol. And then, of course, they removed one of the statues from the Kentucky Capitol this year, so there's an empty spot. I think they should maybe put Mrs. Crawford's statue in there. She's the one who went through all of the pain, and they actually did name a hospital after her over in Greensburg, Kentucky, the Jane Todd Crawford Memorial Hospital. So that's a little bit about Kentucky history with Women's History Month and that wonderful, brave, pioneering woman, Mrs. Crawford, and the Kentucky doctor who performed that surgery. So great piece of Women's History Month there with a Kentucky flavor. So now let's talk about bills that got passed and bills that failed in this week's legislative roundup. Let's start off by talking about bills that have become law. So the legislature has passed these bills. They're now on the governor's desk to be signed or vetoed. And then after about another week and a half, the legislature is going to come back in to vote to override any vetoes as they see fit. And then, to be honest, there's probably going to be a lot of court battles after that. But this is where the bills stand at the end of the legislative year. First of all, there is Senate Bill number 8 has been passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives. It's on the governor's desk. And this would say that your children may not be vaccinated against your will. So I think this is wonderful. This upholds some liberty. If you want to get a vaccination, you are free to do that, but it cannot be forced upon your child against your will. Wonderful bill that's now been passed into law, Senate Bill 8. Let's talk about another one, and this one, this is very controversial. It's a big bill, and it still needs some help to get across the finish line. This is House Bill number 563. It is called the Tuition Tax Credit Bill. Now, what this does is this allows a parent here in Kentucky to send their kid to any public school they want, and the money, the tax money that goes for that kid, follows the kid to that public school. So this is a wonderful step for liberty. It's going to increase educational opportunities. And so I think this is very positive. They wanted to be able to do this where the money would follow a kid if they decided to go to a private school or to a religious school. They weren't able to get that part into the bill, but it's a step in the right direction. The money should follow the student. So this bill has been passed. It'll go to the governor's desk. He will veto this bill, and then it'll come back to the legislature. And the legislature had enough votes to pass it, but they're right on the edge of having enough votes to override the veto. So if you think, hey, this is a good bill, I think the tax money should follow the kid to whatever school that they're going to, then you need to contact your legislator to encourage them to help pass the veto override for this bill. If you'd like to call the Kentucky Capitol to leave a message for your legislators, the phone number is 1-800-372-7181. And that is House Bill number 563, the Tuition Tax Credit Bill. Let's talk about another one that got passed this year, and that is House Bill number 155. I am super excited about this. This is a bill that says there is no constitutional right to an abortion in the Kentucky Constitution. Just in case we get some court or some lawyer that want to say, well, it's a constitutional right. It specifically spells it out. No, it isn't. And the governor doesn't even get to veto this because the legislature gets to put this up for a vote to be in the Kentucky Constitution, and that may only be voted up yes or no by the Kentucky citizens in next year's election. We don't have any elections this year. The state legislature here in Kentucky, the General Assembly, passed a lot of great pro-life bills this year. I applaud them for that. This is a measure that goes up to the people for a vote. I'll look forward to you to voting for this in the next year's elections. Something else that they passed, which I am not excited about, was Senate Bill 120, where they just put slot machines all over the state. And they're like, oh, we need slot machines everywhere. And so they passed a bill. But I always say this, you're never going to gamble your way to financial success. Always a losing investment. But they passed that one. They also passed Senate Bill number 228, talked about a few weeks ago. This has to do with replacing Mitch McConnell as Kentucky's senator, because right now Mitch McConnell is the minority leader, probably not as fun as being the majority leader, and he's been up there for, I think, 40 plus years, and he's not in very good health. Under current law, the governor, Andy Beshear, could appoint anybody he wants to replace Mitch McConnell if McConnell can't serve out his term. And I'm saying Andy Beshear will arrange to have himself appointed for this. Seeing this coming, the state legislature has now passed a law that says, okay, the governor can appoint whoever he wants, but it must be between 3 people that are of the same party from the departing senator, and we get to choose the 3 people. So that has been passed. The governor will veto this, and I am fairly certain they have the votes to override this veto, and then this one will go to the courts, as a lot of these different bills are going to do. Let's talk about one other that they passed, and this is House Joint Resolution 77. I talked about this one a week or so ago. Now, this bill has really been all over the place. This started off, this resolution, saying that we, the legislature, are going to approve every mandate and executive order that Andy Beshear has ever issued. I would have a major problem with that. And that's what we talked about the other week. However, some very wise people added a whole bunch of amendments to this thing. And they specified, okay, well, no, not that. We're just going to approve certain ones that we approve of, and the ones that we don't approve of, we're going to say those all expire after a specified number of days. They have turned what was a very bad bill into an acceptable bill, and I was very happy to see that happen. Had some good things happen there in the legislature with that. So those are some of the laws that did get passed, or bills that have been passed into law. Now let's look at 2 or 3 that did not get passed into law. First of all, let's talk about some bills which I'm so glad, and we should all be grateful they didn't get passed. This is House Bills number 508 and House Bill number 561. These would have raised your taxes at the gas pump. One of them would have raised it 24 cents a gallon, and the other would make the Kentucky gas 34 cents a gallon. But we had a bunch of conservatives who said, I'm not just going to be upset about this, I'm actually going to do something about it. I'm going to call, I'm going to write, I'm going to let my voice be heard, and this thing's got stopped. So thank you for those who participated, who actually were involved, because you made a difference, and gas is not going to go up because of Kentucky's tax rate going up because we weren't involved. And to everybody who voted for Joe Biden, you owe me gas money. So let's talk about another bill which did not pass, and I really am disappointed in this, and that is Senate Bill number 106. The Senate Bill 106 was the Save Women's Sports Act. We saw all kinds of states that have passed this law in just the last 30, 60 days. Kentucky wrote this and never even brought it up to the floor for a vote. This would say that we're not going to allow men to lie and say they're a woman and participate in women's sports. And they didn't have enough to even pull it up for a vote. Very disappointed in that, and I hope you contact your legislator and let them know that you're disappointed in that as well. Maybe we can get this bill passed next year, the Save Women's Sports Act. So there's literally hundreds of bills, hundreds and hundreds of amendments. We'll be talking about some more that passed or failed in the coming weeks and months, and what they're doing at the Capitol on a weekly basis. But that's about all the things we're going to cover this week. We got the history lesson, we got the legislative roundup, and let me leave you with this. I'm going to be speaking at 2 different locations on this coming Sunday, March the 21st. And if you don't have a church that you normally go to, I'd like to invite you out. On Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be in Taylorsville at a church there. It is going to be at 88 Miller Road in Taylorsville, Kentucky. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll be teaching a lesson for the Sunday school hour entitled The Biblical Basis of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. Then we'll be preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ at 11 o'clock. And then that night at 5, I'll be over at a church in Georgetown at 210 New Coleman Road. And there I'll be continuing a series of lessons I've been teaching. And this one that night will be on biblical principles about weapons. We're talking about biblical principles of the Second Amendment, your gun rights. If you don't have a church home, I'd love you to come out to one of these 2 churches. I teach a whole lot of different lessons about America's Christian heritage, talk a lot about Kentucky history, American history, and how that ties in to Christian conservative principles. If you'd like me to teach this over at your church, at your political group, your patriot group, just contact me here on the program. It's lee.watts.kentucky@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to work out the details to teach part of this series over to you. Well, until next week, I'm Lee Watts for Patriot Point. Stand strong and breathe free.